Hello, this video is directed at police officers and magistrates and to some extent people in the military. It's concerning sovereign citizens, and I'm sure a lot of sovereign citizens or people involved in that will watch the video, but it's mostly directed at you. I've seen a lot of information put out by police and FBI and stuff saying sovereign citizens are terrorists and all this kind of stuff. And I think police officers and magistrates may not understand what's taking place. And I understand, when you're dealing with someone on the side of the road, you don't have a lot of time to listen to them. And if you're in a courtroom, you're trying to run people through the courtroom, so you don't have enough time to really listen to them. And even if you did, a lot of what they're saying is probably jibber jabber to you. Unfortunately, most of the people in the sovereign movement are not real educated. They don't have a ability to express themselves verbally or use the King's English, so to speak. And so I'd like to take this time to try to explain to you what's going on, because I hear all this stuff. Oh, the sovereign citizen, he says, he's above the law, he don't have to follow the law, blah, blah, blah. That's not what they're saying at all. Nobody's suggesting that they should be able to go out and murder people and rape and rob and kidnap people. And nobody's saying anything like that. But I think I can explain what's taking place in a way in which you can understand it. And I'm not hating on you, because I'm sure that you took up the profession that you did because in your heart and mind you wanted to do something good for the community. You wanted to stand up for people's rights and freedom and all this stuff. If you're in the military, I get that, and that's admirable things to be doing. However, things aren't exactly what they seem. And although in your heart and mind that may be what you're trying to do, the people you're working for don't have the same view. And I think I can explain this in a way that you can understand it. So let's assume for a moment that you got a job at Walmart. And you go into the meeting for the interview, and they tell you, well, you can't have long hair and nose rings and stuff hanging out of your nose while you're at work. And so you agree to those terms and enter a contract with Walmart, and you get a job. And I decide to come pick you up on your first day of work, to take you out to lunch, to celebrate your new job. And I come in flip-flops and raggedy t-shirt and nose rings and crazy looking hairdo, and Walmart can't do anything to me about it because I don't work for Walmart. I'm not under a contract with Walmart. You are. So I have the right of freedom of expression, but you waived your right to freedom of expression when you signed a contract with Walmart. So even though people have rights, they can waive them through a contract. And in that case, you waived your right to dress however you want when you sign that contract. Now, let's take it a step further. Let's say that Walmart, then starts, let's say Walmart took over the country tomorrow and declared themselves to be the government. And they're going to pass all these new rules and laws and statutes. The aisles in Walmart are crowded, so if you push your cart more than 2 miles an hour, you're going to get a $900 fine. And while you're at it, there's Walmarts are so close to each other, they're on every corner. So even if you're on the road in between the two Walmarts, it's still the basic same area as Walmart. So we're just going to have speeding limits and everything in between the Walmarts while you're on the road and everything. Let's take it another step further. Let's say that Walmart declared bankruptcy. And then they tell you, well, you're an employee of Walmart. And so as an employee and agent of Walmart, we're going to start taxing you and taking money out of your account or your taxes and bank account in order to pay for our bankruptcy. You'd say, screw you, man. I'm not helping you pay for your bankruptcy. Y'all did that. I got nothing to do with that. I'm just an employee. But let's say they do it anyways. And let's take it another step further. Let's say they declare for everybody in the United States they're going to have to help pay for the bankruptcy. And you say, wait a minute. I didn't enter a contract. This guy, he entered a contract. He's an employee of yours. You know, that's one thing. But I haven't entered a contract with you. I don't work for Walmart. And they come back and say, yeah, but you come and do business with us. You come shopping and stuff. So you're an agent, you know, in Walmart just by the fact that you do business with us. Well, how long would it take for the American people to get their guns together and go overthrow Walmart? Wouldn't take very long. Well, that's exactly what's taking place in this country. Now, you might say, well, there's a big difference, Jimmy. Walmart is a business, and the government is the government. Well, that ain't exactly true. In 1933, the United States declared bankruptcy. And because they were unable to pay their bills and debts, they took away all the gold and silver, so you can't pay with gold and silver anymore. So everybody's bankrupt. Now, we the people didn't do that. Washington, D.C. did that. And in fact, the only ones that really declared bankruptcy was the 10-mile square of their area in Washington, D.C. But they've tricked the whole country into helping them pay for the bankruptcy. And as a result of declaring bankruptcy, the international bankers that was funding them said, well, this is what we'll do. We want you to dissolve the United States. There'll be no more United States of America. What we want you to do is we want you to create a corporation, a for-profit corporation for the benefit of the international bankers in the corporation. And we want you to create policies and rules so that you can then enforce them against the citizenry and tax them and take money and fine them money so the corporation can make money. And that's what's happening in this country today. So a couple of things come to mind that's important. Number one, in Schechter Poultry Company versus United States, Congress had created an act that allowed corporations and businesses to create policies and enforce them against the people as if they were law. The president even signed an order agreeing it, adopting it, saying it was okay. But the United States Supreme Court overturned that. They said, no, businesses and corporations cannot create policies and enforce them against the people as if they were law. Well, that's exactly what's taking place today. A true government, a sovereign, can create laws. But because we don't have a government anymore, we might call it a government, they do that to trick the average person that don't know any better into thinking that it's a government, but it's really not. It's a corporation, a for-profit corporation. It's not buying for the people anymore, it's buying for the corporations. And their whole objective is to get access to money to fund their corporation. It's a profit thing. So a couple other things that's important is because they're bankrupt and because they're not a government, they can't create laws. There's not one single law on the book that's valid. What they are allowed to do is create policies. Just like Walmart can have a policy. Walmart has a policy that says you're supposed to show your receipt when you walk out the door. But it doesn't apply to me. I'm not an employee of Walmart. Most people do show it, but you don't have to. Now, if they want to claim that you've stolen something and want to charge you with stealing something, that's a whole other argument. But just trying to force somebody to follow one of their policies isn't lawful. So, same thing applies to the United States. They and the states, the counties, the cities are all corporations now, under the envelope of the United States. And so what they create is not laws. It's called statutory policies, just like policies that Walmart create. And they can't enforce them against people unless the people accept them and agree to it through a contract, just like you were forced to follow Walmart's policy of dress code because you signed a contract with Walmart and you're receiving a benefit by getting paid a paycheck. Then you signed that contract voluntarily and you waived your rights not to follow those policies. Well, the same thing happens with the government. They are creating policies, they call them statutes and codes, to mislead and trick everybody into believing that it's law, but it's not law. And it's not enforceable against someone unless they have entered that contract. And what they did when you were born is before 1917, people kept a record of their birth in their family Bible or whatever. And after 1977, the state started requiring birth certificates, and by 1933, everybody was required to have birth certificates in every state. And what that birth certificate is your mother is signing you over to the state, to the government. They become your new parent, so to speak, and you have no rights anymore. And that contract is a contract that they're using to claim that everybody falls under their policies and is required to follow those policies. And then they get on TV and stuff and tell people, oh, you got to have a driver's license, you got to have a social security card, you got to do this, you got to do that, which isn't true. But they tell you that because they got you in a contract now with that birth certificate. And so most people go and enter more contracts, social security card, marriage license, birth certificate, driver's license. And if you have those items, then you've signed a contract agreeing to follow those laws. You give up your right to travel without a license. But what sovereigns are doing is they figured that out. They figured out what the contracts are, and they're rescinding their signature on them and getting out of those contracts and getting their rights back. So nobody's suggesting that you can go around and kill people and harm people. What we're talking about is all these policies that everybody's declaring as being law when they're not, that they're trying to tax and fine and put people in jail for where there's no injured party, like a speeding ticket. So they're just simply getting out of those contracts, and everybody should. And taking it one step further, what the government's doing because of their bankruptcy is they're taking your birth certificate and they're creating a bond or a trust out of it, and they're selling your bond around the world on the stock market and to other investors, and they own you. And so now they can create whatever law, statutes and policies and whatever they want and try to enforce it against you. But you have to remember, only the people are sovereign, and that's the FBI and everybody trying to put a bad word out about everybody being terrorists and stuff, but that's not the way the U.S. Supreme Court sees it. They understand what sovereigns are, and it's the people that's sovereign. And everybody in the United States of America was sovereign until 1933. Excuse me. So, and it's something else you need to keep in mind. I was big into the Patriot movement back in the early 90s, up until they had that false flag event in Oklahoma City. And then they started saying, well, all these patriots are domestic terrorists, and the next day, man, you couldn't find and I didn't know anybody that was violent or wanted to hurt anybody, but the next day you couldn't find anybody that even talk about patriots. The patriot, I don't know what you're talking about, because they were scared that they would get classified as being some kind of terrorist or something. Well, the same thing's happening with the sovereigns. Anytime a group of people figure out what the government's doing and they start informing other people of what's going on, the government kind of gets scared, because they know if the people ever figure out what's really going on and what they're doing, they'd all be drug out in the street and hung, because they've done some dirty, dirty stuff. And so that's all they're doing now with the sovereigns. They're saying they're terrorists and this, that, and another to try to scare people away from having anything to do with them or studying or trying to learn anything about what they know. That's what it's about. In fact, anytime the government goes after somebody and says there's, tries to discredit them, that's the person you need to be paying attention to. You need to figure out what that person knows or is saying that's got them upset. Because if you're some nutcase that don't know what you're talking about, government ain't going to be interested in you. They're not even going to talk about you. You'll be nothing to them. So if they're talking trash about you, that means you know something that they don't want everybody else to know. And they're trying to tarnish your reputation or whatever and scare people away from paying attention to you. So all they're doing, and I'm not saying that you won't run into a sovereign that's dangerous at some point. There's dangerous people in every group of people. It could be, a gang in Los Angeles or a religious group or whatever. There's going to be crazy people everywhere. But most of the people you're going to come in contact with, they're not wanting to harm you. I have no desire whatsoever to hurt somebody. I care about your soul. That's the reason I'm telling you, doing this video. I want you to know what's going on. And I have no desire to hurt you whatsoever. But I tell you this, a couple of things that police officers may not be aware of. And it concerns me a little bit. And that is, when you're dealing with someone who is a sovereign, who is under no contracts with the government, and therefore don't have to follow any of their statutory policies because they're not under a contract with them. If you arrest that person, or take their property, or seize their property, or have their vehicle towed, it's not the same as if you take someone's property who is in a contract with the government. When you sign that driver's license and you're in that contract, that gives you, the government, the authority to take things like that. But that does not apply if you're dealing with a sovereign. And the United States Supreme Court, meaning if you were to try to arrest somebody that don't have a driver's license or registration or whatever, they're not required to if they're not under any contract with the government. And the U.S. Supreme Court said, so if you did that, tried to arrest them, it would be an unlawful arrest. And the United States Supreme Court has said multiple, I don't know how many times, that an individual who is being unlawfully arrested has the right to resist arrest up to and including killing the police officer to prevent his arrest. I wouldn't try to kill nobody, because they just want to arrest because I don't have a driver's license or whatever, some foolish stuff like that. I'm not, because I can handle it in the courtroom. I know how to solve the problem in a nonviolent way. But I do have the right to do that. And I'll tell you something else. The Supreme Court not long ago in Bonds versus the United States said that when you're dealing with a sovereign, someone that's not under a contract with the government is what they're telling you. When you're dealing with a sovereign and you injure them by arresting them because they don't have a driver's license or towing their car or whatever, when you arrest a sovereign, the same rules of immunity and qualified immunity and all that stuff that apply in your typical 1983 action or whatever, those type of things don't apply when you're dealing with a sovereign. And a sovereign, if you arrest them and cause them an injury, can come after you personally. Meaning they could come after your house, your car, take everything you own, and garnish your wages for the rest of your life. Whereas something like that wouldn't happen in a regular 1983 action against someone that is under contract with the government, because you would have qualified immunity or whatever as long as you didn't violate the Constitution. And you have the insurance company for the city or county or state or whatever that would pay the damages if you were found to be liable. But when you're dealing with a sovereign, they can come after you personally and your property personally. And I wouldn't do that. I'm not going to, if you was just really outrageous, acting stupid, and running around pulling people out of the car and shooting them and acting stupid, just because they don't have a driver's license or don't want to ask you questions or something, in an extreme case like that, I would try to take your house and car and stuff away from you to teach you a lesson. But other than that, I don't want anything that belongs to anybody else. I don't want to harm anybody. And you work hard for a living, I work hard for a living. Everybody should be able to work and enjoy whatever they earn from their job. But there are poor people out there that don't have a job. And I just saying that if you come across the wrong person, you can. The U.S. Supreme Court's already said it. You can be went after it in your personal capacity, and you could lose everything you got. And I tell you right now, and in that situation, the city or county or whatever, or an insurance policy or whatever they have, it isn't going to cover you. And when you lose everything you got, they'll kick you to a curb. They'll use you as long as they can to make money for their corporation. But if you become a liability to them and you lose everything you got, they'll just kick you to the curb, because there's always some other idiot somewhere that thinks he wants to be a police officer or a public official or whatever. And they'll put them in that place. You're easily replaced. So it's something for you to think about. I want you to be aware you can't just believe everything your supervisors tell you or the attorney for the county. They ain't going to tell you the truth. Because if they told you the truth, you'd probably quit your job and refuse to go to work for them. They're not going to tell you the truth. So they tell you all kind of foolishness, tell you can do anything you want. And I want you to understand that, because I've seen, and you may not be that way, but I've seen a lot of police officers just they think they're God because they got a badge. Well, that badge is not what gives you authority. What gives you the authority and where your authority comes from is those contracts. And if the person you're dealing with isn't under the contract, then you've got no authority. If you mess with somebody or touch them or move them, that's kidnapping and assault and everything. And you could be in big trouble. Theft of property if you have their car towed, and they can come after you personally. And they can resist your arrest to the point of killing you if they wanted to. And there's probably crazy people out there that would do that. But I think most of the people don't look at it that way. Most of us that are seriously involved in this and know what's going on, we realize that the problem can be solved with paperwork. And eventually, everybody in the United States will figure out what's going on, and when they do, the gig will be up. Because it's easy to get out from underneath those contracts. And once you get out from underneath those contracts and you're sovereign, then the government can't make any money off of you anymore. They make money off of that birth certificate. And like I said, they create a bond, a trust or bond with it, and they sell it or trade it. And then it makes interest, and the money on that interest, once it matures, at age 65 or whatever, or when you die is probably when it really, really matures. That's probably the reason they're trying to kill people off at a younger age, poisoning the food and water and everything else so they don't live as long, so they can go ahead and collect earlier. But what happens when a charge, say a speeding ticket, is brought against somebody? That charge, if you look up in Black's Law Dictionary, a charge actually means a lien. So they're actually putting a lien against your cestui trust, that birth certificate. So the thing that's on trial or being charged is actually your birth certificate, not you. Because a government can't deal with flesh and blood human beings. They can only deal with other artificial entities. That's why your name is in capital letters on your birth certificate, driver's license, social security card, is because the government has created, when you were a baby, they created an artificial entity that they can interact with. And so they're charging the bond, they're placing a lien against your birth certificate so they can get money out of that trust, out of that cestui trust, off your birth certificate. So, and it doesn't matter whether it's a murder charge or a speeding ticket, it's all the same thing. It's all commercial, and it's all civil, really. All crimes are civil. They don't tell you that. They call them criminal, but they're all civil because a corporation can't create criminal laws. But they tell you it's criminal so people don't know any different. But it's all civil, and it all has to do with that money. If you pay the money, the lien that they're putting on it, then you can go home. If not, they'll put you in jail and get the money out of the Sestacute Trust to pay for the damages or whatever fees and fines that they claim that they have. So that's what's taking place, and I'll probably do some other more detailed videos in the future dealing with the Sestacute Trust and your birth certificate and all these other contracts. But I just wanted you to understand that there really is no difference between the government, whether it's the state or federal or city or county, in Walmart. They're all corporations. It's all the same thing. And they're allowed to create policies for themselves, and they can enforce them against anybody that accepts them and waives their rights. And your rights come from God. They don't come from the Constitution. So if you want to waive your rights and enter contracts with the government, that's fine. There's nothing illegal in that area with what the government's doing, because there's an absolute right to contract. So even corporations can enter a contract. So if you want to enter a contract with a corporation, with the government, nothing wrong with that. The problem comes in when someone gets out of those contracts, or there is no contract or never was a contract, and then there's police officers and people running around trying to put them in jail and everything when they've done absolutely nothing wrong, and the government has no authority over them. So that's where the problem comes in, people getting shot and everything else over silly stuff. And y'all need to cut that out. It ain't worth trying to kill people and drag them out of the car and beat them up just because they don't want to answer your question. They're doing that on purpose. They're not doing it to be ugly. They're doing it to create a record. Most of the time they're recording. They want a record showing what they told you and what you told them, so they can show that you had no ability to articulate any probable cause reasons for believing that they were under a contract. In other words, you were unable to show that they had a driver's license, or even a reason to believe that they were a person required to have a driver's license. Because you don't know what's really going on, and the people that train you and teach you don't tell you what's going on, because they just want you to go out there and rape, rob, and pillage and treat everybody like maniac. And when they don't bend to your authority, you want to drag them out of the car and shoot them and tase them and everything else in the world. And it's just it's crazy. There's no need to do that. So I hope that you don't have to believe anything I tell you. You don't know me from Adam, but I hope it'll at least plant a seed in your head that you'll go out and do a little research and find. This information is out there if you look for it, and you need to know about it. You really do. Because I tell you what, I think most of you wouldn't be doing what you were doing if you knew the truth. And same thing for the military. People go in the military, they think they're going to fight and uphold the freedoms and all that stuff, and that's not what's going on at all. It's other countries that, like Libya, one of the greatest countries that ever existed. And we went over there and destroyed it because they wouldn't join that banking system. They weren't bankrupt. And the international bankers couldn't control them because they accepted gold. And all the oil and stuff that they had, they would give that money back to the citizens. They'd give them a check every year. They'd pay for their houses. Every person, when they got old enough to get married, would get a house for free. They didn't have to pay any taxes or nothing on it. They didn't get to keep it. When they died, it would go back to the government, and then the government would turn around and give it to the next person. But everybody was provided with that. Everybody was, you could go to school, college, any place in the world you wanted to go, and the government would pay for it. And it was because they was filthy rich, because they dealt with gold and silver and not this fiat money. And they weren't bankrupt, and the international bankers didn't like it. And so they went around and got the United States to go in there and attack them and destroy their country and put them back in the Stone Age, where they would be forced to then join the banking system to borrow money to rebuild their country. And that's what they do every time they get a hold of a country that don't want to submit to the banking system, they invade them and claim they're terrorists and all kind of crazy stuff so the American people say, oh yeah, that's a good thing, go over and invade them and kill all them people. Yeah, that's a good thing, crazy people over there need to get rid of them people. When in reality, we're the crazy ones. We're the ones that needs to be dealt with. We're the ones that allowing this fake government to go running around killing everybody just because they want to be independent and survive without a banking system, without having to join this banking system and borrow money that's worthless and tax everybody to death over it. So I hope you'll go do a little research into it. There's places you can find it. It's all over the internet. I'm not the only one that talks about it. And it's in the law books and stuff, but you got to look for it. You got to know what you're looking for. And I'll do more videos in the future to try to hone in on some of the issues. Thanks for watching. Bye.